Penny, can you spare me a moment? Penny, seated in the first row of the Belfields pit, glanced up with unfocused eyes. A tattered paperback of Iphigenia lay open in her lap. Oh, David. Sorry. I was going over Clytemnestra's little "How dare you lie to me" speech to Agamemnon. Listen to this line. We buy what we loathe with what we love. Gorgeous, isn't it? Very. It's a juicy play, all told. David Harkins sat down just behind her. But I did want to ask you about it. Penny had known this since the meeting at the Beldame that this was probably coming, and she was still not really prepared to answer. She closed the book and met his gaze. I was waiting for someone to hit me with it. Ask me as in why I was so adamant about wanting to do it. That's it. He cleared his throat. You know, I wouldn't have brought this up when you first announced it. After all, you were trying to nail down a partnership with Albert Wixell, and none of us would have dreamed of arguing or questioning your decision under those circumstances. A solid attempt at securing financing is no time to have your authority or your creative decisions challenged. And we certainly wouldn't have wanted to sabotage the chance. Besides, it's a marvelous piece, and we're quite excited over it. But his voice trailed away. But it's off my usual lists, and I seemed awfully set on doing it. Is that it? Penny modulated her voice upward. There was banging coming from backstage. Plumbers Ring had hired were installing new pipes and back-to-back sink units in the two-star dressing rooms. It was the first day of many in which the Belfield would ring with workmen hammering, sawing, yelling from room to room. Since Penny had decided to begin rehearsals at once, the next few weeks were likely to be chaotic, even without taking a possible haunting into consideration. That's it, David agreed. It's not just me, and please don't think we're objecting. We're not idiots. We love the play and the idea in general, and Petra in particular is over the moon about the part. But you seemed, well, almost fierce. And leaving aside that you're not usually fierce, I got the impression there was something else going on. Donald noticed it too, and he's feeling a bit uneasy. Penny, be straight with me. Is there something odd about this place? Ah, damn. Penny closed her eyes for a moment. Over the distant banging. Was that something else she was hearing? Someone whispering? No, surely not. Wasn't possible, not with the noise those workmen were producing. Penny, sorry, I was distracted there for a moment. She wondered how much to tell him. None of the cast members knew anything about the haunting of Ringen's new home the previous summer. Something in Penny had closed down with the thought of treating something so powerful as backstage chatter, mere gossip or dinner-table conversation. Betsy Roper, before her passage into whatever unimaginable corner of eternity had finally claimed her, had left a bit of herself with Penny, and Penny would not disrespect that memory or take its results lightly. No. Penny, listen. David's head was canted sharply to one side. Is there some... Jesus, what on earth is that? Penny sucked in her breath. No, she thought, no. Don't be this, don't do this. I'm not ready to deal with this. Whispering, harsh and guttural, rose from the floor, the seats, the ground beneath them. It gained resonance, lifting to a nearly metallic pitch of respiration. It filled the auditorium like a flood tide of dirty seawater.
Arrêtez, mauvais, mauvais. Je fonce deux, que vous avez offense deux. Arrêtez. Libérez-moi, trop chaud, les feux de l'enfer. Trop chaud, me blesse, me brûle. Arrête!
The room filled with smoke. They could smell it, taste it on the still air. Invisible, it forced itself into lungs, eyes, nostrils. This time the smell of water was entirely absent. Here was wood and thatch, catching, feeding, jumping from joist to beam to eaves, taking and spreading. It was laced with ugliness, an unearthly barbecue neither meant nor fit for the human senses. Penny gagged, coughing, fanning at nothing and fighting for air. David Harkins, his jacket pulled up to protect his airways, was the color of dirty ice. He looked blind. We have to get out. Penny, not knowing if her voice had sounded beyond her own bone-dry throat, got David by the sleeve of his jacket. Unheeded, the paperback Euripides fell from her lap to the carpet. Hurry, go, come on, David, move.
Vite, je vous en prie. Enlevez-moi le despotisme d'accrochage, s'il vous plaît.
He came up limply, letting Penny drag him. As she pulled him up the aisle toward the foyer door, stumbling and panting and whimpering breath, she felt how physically unresponsive he seemed, heard his shallow gasps for air, and wondered if he was having a heart attack.
Un prêtre, je vous en prêtre, s'il vous plaît, ne me laisse pas brûler.
The words, pulsing with tangible agony, crested and died as Penny kicked the foyer door open and wrenched David clear of the auditorium. Something, an audible memory, or perhaps nothing more than an echo of those cries for pity and surcease, streamed out in a rush, through the propped-open front doors and into the chilly London afternoon, only to dissipate like burned-out fireflies as they met the reality of the modern world. There you go. And that's all I'm reading, and thank you, Juliana, for making it absolutely awesome. Thank thank you for not making me break and read the French. It can do it, but you just go, it's like, oh, this is, I'm going to miss you when you're not here to read this for next for signing. So there we go. Does anybody have any questions about the series or about the book in particular? Granted that most of you have read it. Silence? Yes.
I'm actually one of the people who hasn't read it, and could you talk a little bit about, I know the titles come from old ballads, but could you talk a little bit about this title in particular?
Ah, yes. This is, and actually it's an old, as far as anybody can tell, this one is an old border ballad from the north, actually from the North Country of, literally between Scotland, basically the River Clyde coming down to like the north of England to where the Percys used to be in charge, you know, Yorkshire in the north. There are a couple of different versions of it. It's in the, I think, the second volume of the collected child ballads. It's the words that I use, and you will find them as chapter headings throughout the book. The song itself has, about 40 verses. It has ghosts, it has magical animals and leading, and basically speaking, it's told by a young woman called Eleanor, who, basically the first verse says it all. My mother did me deadly spite, she sent thieves in the dark of the night, put my servants all to flight, they robbed my bower, they slew my knight. And basically, she's a young girl, and according to her version of the story, her mother was a complete Fruit Loop, sent a hired assassin after her because she didn't want to join a nunnery or something and ran off to get married instead. And the would-be assassins ended up killing not her, but her husband and her newborn son, left her the sword to kill herself with, and she decided, I don't think so. And instead, she went into drag, cut off her hair, dressed up as a guy, changed her name to William, and went off to, as she says, serve her king as the famous flower of serving men. And the definitive version of this is done by the best musician doing this stuff alive, Martin McCarthy. And we had a conference over this, and I said, okay, from the feel of the song, I want to set the events in the middle of the Peasants' Rebellion, because it's right in my wheelhouse, and I used to tutor this stuff, and I don't have to do a lot of research. It just feels like it's from that period. Is there any reason at all it couldn't be, you know, sort of mid to late Plantagenet period? He said, no reason at all, assuming it wasn't some little border, could have been some little, you know, border guy called Walter the Moneyless trotting around in his bog and, you know, calling himself a king. You can make it anybody you want to, and, you know, anywhere in about a 400-year period and get away with it. So I decided to set it there. The song itself, one of the things that runs through the entire series is the concept that a song, whether, you know, specifically the bardic songs that tell you a story, that literally have a plot, you know, you're only ever seeing one person's point of view. What happens if it's not true? What happens if the person telling the story is covering up or remembering wrong, or what, you know? So in this one, which starts out with a crime, which starts out with a murder, I started wondering what happens if maybe Eleanor's not telling the truth. Maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe there was something else going on, you know. Maybe there were no villains in this. Maybe there were no innocents in this, you know, just what exactly happened. And then, of course, how to create a crime, and that turned into a crime within a crime. And a fairly explosive version of an exorcism. There's nothing gentle about this ghost or how she died, and there's nothing gentle about the song. I mean, it's very little bits of lore if you want them from the song. You'll hear use of the phrase "hokey ground," which is the old English countryside, southern England actually, countryside term for hawthorn, the plant hawthorn, which, as it happens, was used as an accelerant when people were being burned at the stake because it burns so nicely. And her theater is located on Hawthorne Walk, so there are lots of, you know, little touches like that. So,
What's the next book, and
Mattie Groves.
when's it coming out?
Next autumn, and it's on my editor's desk, and the ghost in that one is a real... He's an incubus.
That works.
He's really nasty. Yeah, he's extremely nasty. A lot of fun to write. A lot of fun to write.